Performance Center in Southland, Texas. Thank you so much for coming and inviting me to speak. I love talking about the brain, and I love helping people understand that the brain really controls everything that you do in your life. How you pay attention, how you stay on task, how you finish what you start, how you remember what your mood is, how you interact with your spouse and your colleagues and your friends. All of that is a function of how your brain performs. If your brain is out of balance, if it has too much of something or not enough of something, it can't work very well. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. First, I'd like to just introduce myself to you, tell you what my training is, why I do what I do. Then I'll tell you a little bit about the Brain Performance Center. Then I'll talk to you about brain health in general. And then I'll talk about brain fitness. And I've put together a packet of information that I will leave each of you with that will be a fitness program for you to use at home with your friends. And we'll actually do 2 or 3 of the exercises together so you'll get a feel for it. Okay? Now, as I said, I'm the clinical director of the Brain Performance Center. I've been in business for about 3 years. I started off over a decade ago and I did my internship with a neurologist. And I worked for him for 7 years. Shortly after I joined him, I got board certified in neurofeedback, then biofeedback, and then got certified as a wellness coach. We use all of those modalities, neurofeedback, biofeedback, and coaching to help people improve their brain performance at the Brain Performance Center. The first thing that you do when you come to the Brain Performance Center is we see what is going on in your brain. You mentioned earlier to me that you had chemotherapy, that you've got a lot of chemo fog. And that's very natural. That does occur quite a bit. There's some good research behind that talks about that. But what that chemotherapy does is it creates a change in your brain. And that change in the brain creates an imbalance. You've got 20 spots on your brain that actually have a job that they do in the brain. And this is the way I look at the brain. I'm going to zoom this up a little bit so you can see it. But this is the way that I look at the brain. This is the nose and these are the ears. This part of your brain, where you have these dots, is called the frontal lobes. That's the part of your brain where you pay attention, you stay on task, you make good decisions, you're not impulsive, you concentrate. Working memory is right here. How within this child? Yes, ma'am.
I have a stroke and on the thinking side of the brain.
On the left side of your brain?
Yes, ma'am.
That you bring up a very good point. The left side of your brain is cognition, it's logic, and the right side of your brain is emotion. And people that have a stroke usually are out of balance along the sensory motor strip. Every part of your brain, every part of your body connects to your brain along that strip. The brain only gets information 2 ways. How do you get information? You see it or you hear it. If you see it, the information, the stimulus comes into the eyeballs, goes to the back of the brain, which is the occipital lobes. If you hear it, it comes into the ears and goes into the temporal lobes, which sit above and behind the brain on both sides. If there's too much activity in the frontal lobes, then maybe you can't pay attention. If there's out of balance along the sensory motor strip, maybe you've had a stroke. If you have problems processing, if people have to ask you to do something 3 or 4 times before you really understand what it is they want you to do, you may be out of balance in the temporal area. And if you have to read something 5 or 6 times before you totally get it, then you may be out of balance in the occipital lobes. So when I say out of balance, what I mean is all that you have going on underneath the scalp is electrical activity. You've got neurons, and neurons have little dendrites. And dendrites are like little fingers, and they're firing. They're creating positive, excitatory, and inhibitory charges, positive and negative charges. And when those neurons or dendrites are firing together, they actually create a synapse. And that synapse creates the rhythm of the brain. And the rhythm of the brain are your brain waves. When you're asleep, you have real big slow waves, what we call delta waves. When you're going into that sleep, or you're coming out of that sleep, When you're kind of in that foggy state, you want 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes to lay there in bed. That's a theta state. Then you have alpha. And alpha is a good brainwave. Have any of you ever meditated? Used meditation for stress relaxation? It's a great way to relax. But if you meditate, you tend to go to an alpha state. And alpha is a good brainwave if it's in the back of your brain and your eyes are closed. If you have too much alpha left side frontal when your eyes are open, it will create depression. If you have too much alpha right side sensory-motor strip, it will create anxiety. So where that alpha is and when it occurs is very important in brain health. Then you have processing powers. How many of you here know somebody that every day we have problems that we have to deal with? All of us do. Mm-hmm. And do you know anybody that when that problem happens, they just get overwhelmed? They either shut down, they get emotional, they get angry. It's because they don't have enough low beta. Low beta is a processing power that allows you to calmly think through your problem and think, okay, my computer's not going to work. Oh my gosh, I've got somebody waiting for me. What am I going to do? Okay, I'll reboot my computer. Instead of, oh, my computer won't work. Somebody's waiting. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? So that low beta provides that nice calm transition for you when you're problem solving. Then you have beta, and that's what you use when you're planning what you're going to do in your day, when you're looking at maybe what movie you're going to go see with a friend, when you're balancing your checkbook. That's your processing power. And how many of you have gotten into a car and the battery in that car was dead, and that car wouldn't start? Have you ever had that happen to you? You know that sound that you hear? It just won't turn over. If you don't have enough beta in your brain, when you sit down and you try to do your work, that's the same thing that happens. That brain just won't kick in. And it's very, very hard to process. To stay on task, to finish what you start, and to have your brain perform. Then you have high beta. And high beta is just a real little fast wave, and it doesn't do anything good in your brain. All it does is make you anxious or irritable or create dysfunction. If you have it in the frontal lobes, then you can't pay attention, or maybe you can't finish what you start. If you have it along the sensory motor strip, then you probably have sleep problems. If you have it in the temporal lobes, your auditory processing is difficult. When the temporal lobes also are verbal memory, if you have it in the occipital lobes, you have to read something over and over and over. So that's what creates imbalance in the brain. And a lot of times people will find out they have too much beta, and they'll say, oh, too much beta, that's the good stuff, right? No. Too much, not enough. It creates imbalance in the brain. And when the brain is in balance, it has a hard time doing its job. What we do at the Brain Performance Center, the first thing that we do is we look and see exactly what you have going on in your brain at each one of these spots. Do you have, classical ADHD, people that have a hard time paying attention? Usually they have too much slow wave. When I say slow wave, I mean delta and theta. People with depression, usually, not always, but usually have too much, their theta alpha ratio is out of balance. People with anxiety, remember that low beta we talked about, that calm processing power? People with anxiety a lot of times just don't have enough low beta, or they have too much high beta. So that's the first thing that we do is I put a cap on your head and record the data for 20 minutes. And that gives me an actual picture of your brain waves. I take that and I compare it to somebody else's brain, same sex, same age, and that shows us where you have too much or not enough activity going on. And then we also do some other testing that serves as a benchmark, because how are you going to know if you get better if you don't have something to compare it to? So that's a little bit where we start, the way that we create change in the brain, and we're not going to do that today. Yes, ma'am?
When you do the test, doesn't it data vary at different times?
Well,
And so if you do at that time, it will show one.
we don't do testing out. So last time we did test, that's a very good question. The last time that we do testing is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Because what we want to get is your brain in a rested state. And I have a lot of people that say, oh, I can't come at 1. I can be there at 5:30. Well, your brain's so tired by 5:30, I'm not sure how effective that testing would be. So that's a very good question. Once we determine where the imbalance is, we teach the brain to self-regulate and to get into the right patterns. And medication does that. A lot of people, you know, when they find out they have ADHD, they'll use medication. A lot of people don't want to use medication or it doesn't work. And you can create that self-regulation with your brain by using neurofeedback. With neurofeedback, let's say you have ADHD and you have too much slow wave at what I call F3 and F4, the frontal lobes. I'm going to put that into a computer to have you reduce the amount of slow wave that you have. And you'll see it. Technology makes everything that we do possible today. But you'll see those brain waves and we'll be measuring them. And I'll say, okay, I want you to bring that slow wave below this threshold. When you do, and you'll watch it on a computer screen, and back up just a little bit, those sensors are sensing the electrical activity and they're transforming that activity into the computer and it's displayed on a computer screen. So when you see it, I'll say, okay, you need to make less of that. You need to bring that delta below this threshold. And of course I'll set the threshold so that you can. And you'll be sitting in a chair across from me and you'll be watching a DVD. When your brain does what we want it to, when it is in the right pattern, you're able to see the DVD. When your brain waves go above that threshold, that DVD fades out and gets black. And the brain's, hey, wait a minute, I'm watching that DVD. I want to see that. And the brain will automatically start to repattern. The brain will say, well, I'm up here, I'm doing this. I'll try this. I'll try this. Oh, this is what I'm doing. So when your brain repatterns into the right spot, you get a reward. You get the visual reward, you get to see the DVD, and you get an auditory reward. And that auditory reward is either a beep or a click. And a lot of times people say, Lee, can you turn that noise off? It's very annoying. And the answer is no, I can't. That noise is a stimulus that you can use when you're done with your training, when you're at home, when you're having a hard time. Let's go back to our ADHD. You can't focus, you can't stay on task. You listen for that beep in your brain. And when your brain hears that beep, it's like, oh, what am I doing up here? I need to be down here. And it will self-regulate. Some other things we do at the Brain Performance Center, we do biofeedback, and we're actually going to do some biofeedback here today with each of you. Biofeedback deals with your breath rate, your heart rate. How many of you get anxious sometimes? Do you ever just get when you're driving, you ever just get a little bit anxious? And when you feel anxious, does your heart start to beat faster? It does. It does in everybody. And sometimes we'll feel flushed. Our face will get warm. Sometimes our hands will start to sweat too. Because this is attached to this. What goes on neurologically is also reflected physiologically in the body. And that's how we use biofeedback to show you how to change that. And we'll do a couple of exercises today that will help you understand how you can use your breath to change what's going on and to calm your body down. When your breath rate is in sync with your heart rate, then you create wellness and calmness in the body. When I'm talking to you, I have to be taking 12 to 14 breaths a minute in order to say it all. Most of us, when we're breathing at an optimal rate, we'll breathe about 6 breaths a minute. Some of us it's 5.5, 6.5, but for most of us it's about 6 breaths a minute. And we'll try doing that a little bit later. So